I think that the human mind is kind of like a Swiss Army knife. What happens is when we look at the options in the faraway future, we are rational. 1 week versus this. As the issue gets closer to us, the immediate chocolate becomes emotional. I think we need to understand that the motivation to do the right thing for the right reason is not going to be that high. And instead, we need to figure out how do we help people do the right thing, even if for the wrong reason.
What is a good enough reward that doesn't alter intrinsic motivation for a community or a city, an entire city, to shift behavior to sustainability?
Think about a system where one day somebody could be the judge, the next day they could be an accused. I'm a big believer in randomness. Somebody who is 62 to say, you know what, I don't like my job, let me do a startup. There's a question of, do we think that fairness is about the process or fairness is about the outcome? And usually we complain when the fairness is about the process. I think it's very reasonable to ask everybody who goes on universal basic income to ask them to answer a question about what do they plan to do with this money.
Ever wondered why we make irrational decisions even when we know better? Meet Professor Dan Ariely, a New York Times best-selling author, TED speaker, and professor of psychology and behavioral economics. Known for his groundbreaking research, he's one of the leading experts in the field of human behavior. Through his countless experiments, Ariely has revealed that our decisions aren't as logical as we think. In fact, they're often driven by invisible forces that can trick us into making irrational choices. His landmark work, Predictably Irrational, has reshaped our understanding of how we think about money, time, and even trust. From the psychology behind why we overpay for things to how we rationalize dishonesty, Dan's research has transformed everything from business strategies to public policy. He's consulted for major companies and governments, and his work continues to challenge how we view decision-making. Whether you're making everyday choices or building a business, Dan Ariely's insights into human behavior are both entertaining and essential. Let's dive into the fascinating world of irrationality with one of the most influential minds in science today.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. Nice to see familiar faces and names here. I'm super excited to have you here with us today because it's such a cool, interesting, and important topic all in one. One of my favorites for sure. How are you, Dan?
How am I? The world is a very, very strange, crazy place, and it's a good time to be a social scientist. So I'm trying to see what we can learn from what is going on, not just about what's going on now, but something about the human condition. You know, sometimes it's easier to see things when we're stressed and when things are not going well. It's easier to understand ourselves. So I'm trying to have this positive approach and to have the sense that we're going to learn something new and important about the world from this mess.
Great. Then I want to just update you a little bit. This is a very awesome community where there are people who are truly concerned about our future sustainability, and they are working in all the areas, starting from startups, founders, CEOs who are building inside the SDGs, policymakers, experts, academics, professors, our internal, let's say, tribe. It's growing every day, and it's such a privilege to have awesome people from around the world working on this. Now, we also are privileged today to have such an awesome guest as Dan Ariely, and I want to tell you that inside TLL, our mission is to do whatever we can to solve the SDGs in time, because we lack action, we lack speed, and for many of these things, I think the cause is exactly because we don't apply what we know today about behavioral science. And to tackle today's challenges is not just about the logistical or technical challenges, but all of them are deeply rooted in human behavior. And so understanding how we think, how we make decisions, and why we often act against each other and our best interest, like we are sadomasochists, is crucial if we want to find effective solutions. And so to guide us through the complex issues we have today, one of the best thinkers and leaders in the field of behavioral economics, Professor Dan Ariely, who is the James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Science at Duke University. And his groundbreaking work has transformed our understanding around human behavior, decision-making especially. I know I learned so much from you, Dan, during the years. We know each other for over 6 years now, maybe 7, I don't know. And for everyone, the story is that I wanted to write my 5th book that was called The Theory of Lies. And this was meant to be a very academic book, very complex. For an entrepreneur like me, it was just like too heavy to extend it. And so I paused that. But Dan was gracious enough to help me with research, with materials, with papers to write that book and understand multiple things. And he shared generously everything he had around the matter to just help me with my book. And since then, we connected and we keep in touch. And so I'm super, super happy that we have him here because in my view, you conducted one of the most interesting and beneficial researches around behavior, but in practice, I mean, even the IKEA effect and all those cognitive biases that you just unrevealed for us to know how to make decisions, how we create policies even. And so I'm super curious today to dig inside the SDGs, sustainability, and what we can learn from you in a way to move the needle faster. Welcome, Dan Ariely, to Tech Leadership Lab.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for this lovely introduction. Maybe I'll start by saying that the question of sustainability is probably the toughest question for human behavior. If you thought about all the things that create human apathy, it's a big problem. It will happen to somebody else first. I don't see it progressing. I don't see anybody suffering. Anything I would do is a drop in the bucket. You know, each one of those things create human apathy. And with the question of long-term sustainability, all of these things come together. So, you know, when you think about what are the things that people can get up and go and demonstrate, or what are the things that get up people to go and change behavior, or changing some of their purchase patterns and so on, the challenges that we want to discuss and we're facing as a world are challenges that are not compatible with human psychology. You know, even if you ask somebody, would you take a gamble, or let's take a gamble, say, would you invest $100,000 now to get $1 million in 100 years? You know, most people would say, you know, I'm not investing. Maybe 100 to 1 million, they would say yes. But if you say invest in a very high rate of return, most people would say I don't do it. So it's a problem that don't evoke our emotions. They are too big. They are too far away, and it's very hard to count on people to actually care on a daily basis. And because of that, we need to have a very different approach.
Yeah, I think that there are so many elements that are just joining today as we are living, and especially for the young generation, this is so heavy. So let's start to debug them. And if we start, because I prepared the 7 segments here, but we will see in what direction we are going. What are the most common irrational behaviors that are hindering the progress around the SDGs today, and how we could counteract them?
So I think the most basic one is what is called hyperbolic discounting. And hyperbolic discounting means that our view about the present and our view about the future are very different. And when we think about the future, we act rationally, but when we think about the present, we don't. So consider the following case. Imagine that I asked you, what would you prefer? A half a box of chocolate, amazing chocolate, a half a box of amazing chocolate right now, or a full box of chocolate in a week? Half now or full in a week? and I give it to you and you smell it, it's amazing. It's just incredible chocolate. When you give people these choices, most of them say, I'll take the half a box of chocolate right now. I don't want to wait another week for another half a box of chocolate. That's not very sensible. But if you push the choice to the future and you say, what would you rather have? A half a box of chocolate in a year or a full box of chocolate in a year and a week? Now, it's the same question, right? Is it worthwhile to wait another week for another half a box of chocolate? When it's framed very much in the future, people say, of course I'll wait another week for another half a box of chocolate. What happens is when we look at the options in the faraway future, we are rational. 1 week versus this. As the issue gets closer to us, the immediate chocolate becomes emotional. And we start saying now, 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 now. So if you think about it, we have to admit that we all behave very badly. We can in our small group here, we can ask ourselves, and how many of us don't sleep enough? How many of us don't exercise enough? How many of us eat too much? The list is on and on and on. It's not that we don't know what's the right thing to do. Nobody says, next year I want to use my phone more. Or, next year I want to use my phone more while driving. Or next year, no. There's a lot of things that we want to do less in principle. We understand what's the right thing to do, but in the present we get tempted. And there's much more to say about this, but if we say what is the first problem is that even when we recognize the right thing to do, we have a temptation society and we succumb to temptation. In principle, I want to walk more and drive less. Right now, I don't feel like. In principle, I understand that I could turn the heating off and wear a sweater. Right now, I don't feel like it, and so on and so forth. That could be number one. There are multiple things for number two, so maybe number two, I'm not sure if it's number two or number three. But another one is that we feel that our individual actions are meaningless. Not just feel, they are meaningless. In the big scheme of things, where each of us would work in our personal lives, would not have a big impact. Of course, together we can have a big impact. But this feeling of it's a drop in the bucket is not motivating enough. And by the way, because of that, we need to create other sources of motivation, right? If you say to yourself, left to their own, would we as humanity be sufficiently motivated to think and act in our long-term best interest? The answer is no. But it doesn't mean that we should give up. It just means that we need to add to the motivation. Think about smoking, for example. We did manage to reduce smoking quite substantially. Not stop it, but reduce it quite substantially. How did we do it? Was putting the labels that says, be careful, smoking is dangerous for your health, did this do anything? No. In fact, there was one study that showed that you had a big sign for cigarettes outside of a school, and then you had the big sign with the statement that says, be careful, smoking is dangerous for you. More teenagers smoked when there was the warning. Why? Because now they were rebelling. But if you think about smoking as an example, we reduce smoking not by appealing to people's logic, not by getting people to care about their long-term health. We made it because of a different force in the short term. We made it expensive. We send them out of offices and out of restaurants and so on. And we created the term secondhand smoke, which basically got the non-smokers to look at the smokers as if they are potential killers. Right? We created this feeling that the smokers are killing us. How could you do this to me? And this even happened in big cities where people were inhaling more smoke from the traffic than from cigarettes. But we created financial pressure, we created social pressure. People did not stop or reduce smoking because they said, this is dangerous to my health. People stopped smoking because they said it's expensive, people don't like me, I'm socially unacceptable. right? That was the reason. So we call this doing the right thing for the wrong reason. But in general, when we think about the environment and getting people to care about sustainability in general, I think we need to understand that the motivation to do the right thing for the right reason is not going to be that high. What? And instead, we need to figure out how do we help people do the right thing, even if for the wrong reason. So we said hyperbolic discounting, the fact that we don't look at the future that much. The second part is that each one of our actions is a drop in the bucket. It's not sufficiently motivating. I think the third one is that we end up making decisions that are in the structure of our environment. We call this choice architecture. And choice architecture is the idea that we think that we make decisions, but the reality is that the environment we're in determines our decisions to a large degree. And the standard example for this is signing for organ donation. And I'm sure everybody knows this research or heard about it a little bit, but it basically shows that in countries where organ donation is opt-in, you assume not to be an organ donor, and you have to sign something to become an organ donor. You have to do an action to become an organ donor. Most people don't sign and don't join. In countries that are opt-out, when people are assumed to be organ donors, and you have to sign something to get out of the system, most people also don't sign, and then they become donors. And the differences are huge. The differences are huge between opt-in, where people don't donate, opt-out, when people donate a lot. And what is also interesting is that when you catch people, let's say it's happened in the Department of Motor Vehicle, you catch them outside of the Department of Motor Vehicle and you say, please explain to me your choices. Why did you, the person in the opt-in, decided not to donate, and why you, the person in the opt-out, decided to donate? Nobody says I did it because of the default. Nobody says I didn't know what to do, so I just did nothing, and I let the design of the environment carry it out for me. Instead, people tell you all kinds of choices. Oh, I'm just doing what my parents told me. I'm a wonderful person. I'm afraid of the medical system. People make all kinds of stories. These are not the stories that led to their decisions. These are the stories that justify the decision after the fact. And what really controlled their decision is what was easy to do. What was the default in the system? By the way, just as another fun example, you talk to people and you say, do you like apples? People say yes. You have a bowl of fruit with apples, nobody takes them. You cut the apples into quarters, now they disappear. You know, whatever is easy, we end up doing. If it's a little too hard, we don't do it. Now, this idea of choice architecture is basically asking whether our environment is designed for sustainability. And the answer is no. The answer is our environment is not designed for sustainability. And what we're asking for people is to do lots of things that are counter to sustainability. So it's counter to the environment, right? So instead of being sustainable and us to work with the environment that we're working with is not sustainable, and we have to work against that. Our cars are not designed to be sustainable. Our kitchens are not designed to be sustainable. Our banking systems are not designed for us to think about others, and they're not designed for us to think about long term. I mean, everything that we have is not designed to think about any sustainable goal. Anyway, we can continue, but you get the gist. Maybe the gist is the following. I think that the human mind is kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You know, I don't know if there are any Swiss people on this call. If there are, I'm apologizing in advance. The Swiss Army knife, yeah. the Swiss Army knife is not particularly good at anything. It's not as if you say, oh, I need a screwdriver, let me find a Swiss Army knife, or I need scissors, let me go. It's not particularly good at anything, but it does a lot of things quite okay in a very small package. And our mind is a little bit like that. It does lots of things, kind of okay, nothing perfect, but our Swiss Army knife evolved in a time far away from now. It evolved in a long ago history where the tools that we needed were very different. We did not have tools to deal with compound interest and transportation and living so long and having to make complex medical decisions and so on. But that's what we're left in. We have a Swiss Army knife where most of the tools are irrelevant. They're tools from a long time ago. And those are the tools that we have to deal with this modern environment. Now, you can say, what should we do? Well, of course, we can't give up. But what we need to do is to make the decision environment compatible with our tools. There's a limit to how much you can tell people to change the way they make decisions because we just don't have the right tools. What you need instead is to change the environment so that our tools are more relevant. And here's just one example to think about. Think about the car. When people drive, we did not say, become a rational driver. Don't take any risks. Instead, we have seat belts and anti-lock brakes, and we have rear view mirrors, and we have side mirrors, and we have these little things that don't let us change lane without warning. Just think about it. Every year, we recognize to a higher degree people's inability to drive, and we make the cars take over some of those things. Right? We don't say, let's do more driver's ed and that will solve everything. We know it will not be the case. We know that what we need to do is we need to make cars compatible with our limited ability to drive. And we are making tremendous strides in this. We need to do the same thing for other topics as well. We need to understand that people can't make good decisions, and we need to give ourselves tools with which to make better decisions.
Okay, there is a lot to unwrap here, and you already started to enter in multiple territories, so thank you for that. I think there is a lot of food for thought. Welcome, everyone. I saw, Wendy, what you said about blood donation, and I can give you an example from me, and then this will correlate with multiple of your experiments and how we could then bring our cities, for example, to become more sustainable because there are so many changes. So at the beginning, I'm a blood donor for a long time, when we didn't have enough blood. And so that was one of the things. It was most on character, maybe, or social responsibility, let's say personality traits, but limited number of people. Okay, what they did to increase, it was a monetary payment. That was good, but not good enough. Why? Because they gave cards, and the cards were too cheap. Okay, it's some money, but I cannot do much with that money. So there was an increase, but not enough. And there was another thing with the cards, because every time you received the card, and then it took a couple of days after your blood donation to can get that money. So you see, it was not immediate payment and reward. And what they did right now, and now it's full. I don't have place for myself to go on my regular donation. I need to schedule myself with 2 months in advance. Why? Because they did the shift. They give every time a free new card just because it's available to get that money directly, and they increased the amount.
So what do they do? I didn't understand. They give you what now?
A card. So it's like a credit card. You can, the money is on the card, but before you needed to wait a couple of days. Now it's available because it's a new card. You just need to activate it, and you can use that money exactly after your blood donation. So now we are full with blood, and all the centers are full with blood because they increased the money as well, and they gave this option.
You see, I would say that there are some things that we can pay for, but it's not an easy solution, paying for things. And first of all, when you pay for things, sometimes you can get an undesirable result. For example, in Texas, they decided to pay the kids for reading books. What did the kids do? They read shorter books. So they made money, but overall they read less, right? So sometimes the payment can get people to try to play with the system. The second thing that can happen is that sometimes the payment reduces our social commitment. For example, there was a case where they talked about where to put a site for nuclear waste. And there was a place that basically thought that they are doing it out of obligation for the community, that they are taking on the waste as an obligation. When they start paying them, they said, you can't buy me, I'm not doing it for money. And they rejected it, right? So there are some things that we do because it's our social obligation, because of the prestige it gives us in our own eyes, and so on. And we show that, for example, in charity, if you start paying people, you can actually reduce their willingness to give. Because if I give something to somebody, I think of myself as a good person. But if I get $5, I say, that was just work. I don't work for $5. So it's very tricky. I mean, money can be a motivator, but we have to be very careful as a motivator, especially with the things that we're talking about. We want people to adopt them as ideology. We want it to be part of people's identity. We want it to be something that they view as, this is what a good person does. By the way, with money, imagine I paid you to recycle. And let's say I paid you £0.50 for recycling. You would get up every day and you would say, what's the weather outside? Is it worthwhile recycling? Is it not? 50, half a euro, so on. If I got you to think of recycling as part of your identity, and you say, good people recycle, I'm good people, therefore I recycle, now you would not ask yourself questions about, is it raining or is it not a great weather? So I would say that as a first approximation, I would try to see if I can get people to adopt objectives as part of their definitions of themselves, rather than something they can get paid to do.
Yeah, I agree here. And I know the studies you've done here and the intrinsic motivation that you can just ruin in a company. And I worked a lot on this with multiple leadership teams, or intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, and how you do the differences between the two, and the element of surprise, because if you are including rewards in a surprising manner, that is also much better because people don't expect it and it doesn't ruin the intrinsic motivation, basically. But then again, because we get back to the blood donation and we are here for sustainability, you have the pain of paying experiments again, how immediate cost can block sustainable actions. So if we consider that we want people to have solar panels, and you give them incentives, but at the beginning they need to pay a big amount of money, that is not motivating enough. So, and that's one thing that I would want you to consider before answering. And another thing is, how about if we are working on establishing new behavior? And let's just consider we need 1 month. Okay, what is a good enough reward that doesn't alter intrinsic motivation for a community or a city, an entire city, to shift behavior to sustainability? They receive something in 30 days, but we know that they instilled a new behavior. So that could be something, right?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm going to answer a different question. I'll come back to this one.
Sure.
So quite a few years ago, about 8 years ago, I started looking at the relationship between how companies treat their employees, how the employees feel about the company, and what are the implications of this in the stock market. And we have this acronym called ESG, and for me this is part of S. It's basically saying, how are you treating your employees? And this was interesting for me because I thought that if I can make a case that treating your employees the right way has an impact on financial performance, that will be easy to convince CEOs and CFOs that that's a good thing to do, right? If you have something that says, oh, it's a good thing to do as a human being, but it would cost you money, maybe it's a little harder. But if I can show people what are the investments in human capital that actually have positive return on productivity and stock market return, everybody wins. Why not? Why not do it? So we've studied that for quite a few years. In the beginning on the Fortune 500, the top 500 companies in the US, and then on the Fortune 1000. And here's the basic finding. I can talk about this for hours, but here's the basic finding. When we think about extrinsic motivation, salaries, bonuses, health benefit, financial benefits, all on those things, their impact on stock market returns are very, very limited. Companies that do better on those don't have better stock market performance. When we look at intrinsic motivation, that makes a big difference. But not everything matters. So for example, I already said that salary doesn't count. Fairness in salary counts a lot. The thing that we found in our data that was the biggest predictor of stock market return is whether the people working at the company feel appreciated. Psychological safety ends up being very important. Low bureaucracy ends up being very important. Why does low bureaucracy end up being very important? Because when you have high bureaucracy, you basically tell your employees, I don't trust you, I don't care about your time, and I don't want you to innovate. Just do whatever we have set up for you to do. Feeling appreciated, low bureaucracy, psychological safety, direct connection with your manager, feeling aligned with the goals of the company. So there's a bucket of things that get people to feel connected. And for me, this is a place where everybody wins. If you think about a factory where people hate going in, they're unproductive, the management hate the employees, the stock market doesn't work, that's terrible, everybody loses. On the other hand, if you have another factory that people love to go in, managers are happier, shareholders are happier, everybody wins. And I think not everything we could have win-win-win, but there are going to be some things where we can have win-win-win, and I think we should try and find those out as a starting point. And intrinsic motivation is one of the elements that says, how do we recruit intrinsic motivation for other things as well? So that would be kind of, I think for me, a very important point. And human motivation is so amazing. People run marathons, and people write poetry, and people come up with invention. People are motivated by lots of different things. How do we let those motivations come into play?
I'm curious here if you could give me your insights on UBI, Universal Basic Income. And just to create the context, many people are thinking about this. It's part of the SDGs. It could solve a lot of inequalities or not. But then again, what is the definition of it? Because it's not clear. It's completely different from how maybe the Silicon Valley people are seeing UBI, or if it's just based for America, or it's for the entire world. And also because OpenAI just released some data. Not sure if you are updated about, they had a group of people that they gave $1,000 every month since 2020 and until today. I am not so sure about the findings. They are not so very clear, but from behavioral science perspective, I would love to know if it would be on your hands, what would you do and how would you approach UBI?
Okay. So first of all, for me, the question is a question of resilience and risk-taking. So hear me out. There's a concept called secure attachment. And the story is the following. Imagine you have a 4-year-old kid, you go with the kid to the park, and you say to the kid, go to the swings. And the kid go to the swings, and he or she comes back later, 40 minutes later. Great, you've achieved a kid with secure attachment. If on the other hand, you say to the kids, go ahead, go to the swings, but the kids look behind their shoulder every 90 seconds to see if you're still there, not so successful in secure attachment. And for me, this is maybe the most important part of resilience. Now, if you think about a timeline and you say life gets better, worse, at some point life gets really worse. For example, for me, I got very badly injured. Usually we think about resilience as, do you get better to where you started, above it, below it, how long it takes you? Usually we think about resilience as the rebound to a bad effect. But for me, resilience is the feeling that you have even when nothing happened. When you have this kid, does the kid think that if something bad will happen, you will catch them? Or think about all of us as adults. Do we think that if something bad will happen, somebody will catch us? Now, why is that important? Because the reality is that people cannot take lots of risks. If you're very poor, you really can't take any risk because you go into bankruptcy. Even if you're not that poor, there are lots of risks that we can't handle. That's why we have VCs, right? What VCs tell companies, say, you're not going to take enough risk, so risk my money, not yours, and this way you will take more risk. By the way, I think that parents should be the VCs of their kids, right? I think you should not cap the upside of you should encourage kids to take risks. Now, society in general benefits dramatically from people taking risk. You know, if one of your friends came to you and say, I'm thinking about opening a restaurant, you should tell them don't. Most people who open restaurants fail. They lose money. Don't do it. But how much would you want to live in a city or in a country with no restaurants get opened? The reality is that on an individual level, people shouldn't take risk. But as a society, we all benefit dramatically from people taking risk. Now, you asked me about universal basic income. I think universal basic income is all about providing resilience, and I think it's all about providing an ability for people to take on risk. If we apply universal basic income in a way that people now sit at home and do nothing, this has not been a very fruitful approach. But if we think about universal basic income and we say, we want people to take more risks. I'll give you an example from the US. I have met lots of people toward the final years at their jobs. They don't like their jobs. They really want to retire, but because of healthcare, they are not retiring. They are not willing to take that risk. Now, think about how wonderful it will be. They don't love being there. Other people probably don't love them being there. They're just holding to their seat for health insurance. How much better would it be if those people, tried something else for a few years? But because of health insurance, they can't take the risk. So for me, the real issue is resilience, secure attachment, being the VCs for our citizens, getting people to take more risk. It's not about getting people to, sit on the beach drinking beer. So it's not just saying it's $1,000, it's $1,200, it's $2,500. It's about what are we expecting people to do with this money? By the way, if we create expectation, it's not clear that everybody would follow it, but we want people in general to follow it. So I want somebody who is 62 to say, you know what? I don't like my job. Let me do a startup. It doesn't work out. I have something to rely on. I want people who are young to say, let me take a risk. I'll go and study something. I'll go and do something. And if it doesn't work out, I have a security blanket, like the kid, right? That's what the goal is. So, a lot of time when people think about solutions, they think of it in terms of the amount of money that is transferred from people, from the government to people. But it's not just about that. It's about what are the social expectations and what people want to do with that money. For example, I think it's very reasonable to ask everybody who goes on universal basic income to ask them to answer a question about what do they plan to do with this money, and to ask them a question of what are they going to contribute to society during that time. And this is part of the application process. And
you should condition, you would condition?
No, I wouldn't condition it, because I don't think you need a real condition. So for example, there was a study in which they asked people who were getting money in Kenya to just make a plan of what they're going to do with this money. They didn't have to follow through. But if you make plans, you're more likely to follow through. So I don't think I would have somebody reading through those things and say, no, yes.
So you just create a process they go
That's
through
right.
that makes them think into a direction that you want
That's
them
right.
to set them up for success.
That's
And
right.
how would you
Maybe I will put it publicly. Maybe I will ask them to reflect back on how successful they have been. We can think about more specific mechanisms. So I think that for me, again, it's resilience. What are the behaviors I'm trying to encourage? I'm not trying to encourage sitting on the beach drinking mojito. I'm trying to encourage people to make themselves useful, productive people in society. I want people to take more risk. So the design of the system needs to do exactly that. And in fact, you can imagine how a bad design will achieve the opposite. Mm-hmm. People would take less risk. People would try less hard. That's not the right approach.
And how would you distribute it in a way at the global scale that people don't think it's unfair?
Fairness is a fascinating question. It depends how much money we have and how we decide. So I'm just going to give a principle about fairness. There was a big company. You know already that I don't answer question without stories first. So there was a big company that in the US that basically decided that once a year they're going to pick 2 kids and fund their college. Huge, right? College tuition in the US is very expensive. Let's say $80,000 a year. And they say every year we'll pick 2 kids and we'll cover their tuition. What a beautiful thing. And parents had to submit the kids' grades and resume and an essay, and they picked. And how successful do you think this was in terms of getting people to be more motivated? How appreciative people were of the company that they were doing this gesture? People were very annoyed. Why? Because if you take 1,000 kids and you give 2 of them a reward, you don't give the reward to 998. You have 998 kids who were rejected. When you think about it this way, it's obviously a crazy thing to do because you reject parents based on their kids. Think about how offensive this is. So what was my recommendation? my recommendation was do the same thing. If you can afford 2 kids, pay for 2 kids, it's a beautiful thing. Do it randomly. Do it randomly. Randomly has an intrinsic element of fairness, right? At the end of the day, what you don't want to do is you don't want to be rejected based on a criteria that you don't think is right. So, if it was up to me, I would be very worried. Let's say we can, let's say we can give it to only a subset of the people. I would be very worried about creating a criteria, because I think that whatever criteria you come up with, people would argue with it in all kinds of ways. So I would most likely go for something that has a random component. By the way, the Greeks, a few years ago, I wanted to demand from the Greeks an apology. I said, the Greeks gave us democracy, clearly not working so well. They should apologize. But then I decided, before I asked them for an apology, I decided to read a little bit about Greek democracy. And it turns out that the Greeks use a lot of randomness. For example, every day all the citizens of Rome would get together and they would choose randomly who would be the judge for that day. Think about a system where one day somebody could be the judge, the next day they could be an accused. So anyway, I'm a big believer in randomness as a mechanism for people to understand other walks of life and even be able to taste a little bit life from other perspectives.
This goes well hand in hand with the randomness with surprise, and also that life is not fair and you just need to take it as is.
Randomness doesn't say it's not fair, because the process is fair. The outcome, there's a question of, do we think that fairness is about the process or fairness is about the outcome? And usually we complain when the fairness is about the process, not about the outcome. And randomness solve it. With this big company I told you, I said, okay, you can change the criteria and make it more clear. You'll still make lots of people upset. The moment you say it's random and that's it, and we'll expose it, we'll make it transparent, nobody think it's this. Nobody will say my kid should have been selected. It's just random. So I think that when it comes to, like with this company, with selecting the kids, the relationship between the employees are incredibly important. The relationship between the employees and the management are particularly important. A process that seems unfair is going to reduce loyalty. It's going to kind of change the quality of the relationship. A parent that their kid is rejected and they don't think that the criteria was correct, it would color their whole view to other people. It would color their view to the person who their kid won. It will color their view to the company. There's a lot of costs when the process is not fair. And I think at least randomness is simple and straightforward. Even if it's not ideal, you could say, I can come up with something better and so on. I think in most cases, when you think about the relationship, I think it's much better. Recently, I've been looking at wills. And wills are very interesting. Somebody is leaving a will and they died, so the kids cannot say anything afterward. And people try to do lots of things to create justice in their wills. Oh, this kid helped me more than this kid, or this kid needs more than this kid, or all kinds of things like that. And people are trying to come up with a sense of fairness. All of these attempts to try and create a sense of fairness end up destroying the relationship, not destroying, but reducing the quality of the relationship between the kids. Because, if I think that this kid did 60%, that did this 40%, and even if they agreed with me that this kid did more than this, they might think it's different percentages. at the end of the day, by the way, my recommendation, anyway, no, doesn't matter. But I think that you need to worry about relationships, and when a country or the world is doing anything, the sense of commitment between the individuals and the organization are so important. The relationship is so important. So fairness is incredibly important.
Okay, now your recommendation, if you started, please.
The
What would be?
recommendation for how to do it?
Yes.
So lots of elements. So is your first question, will I do it on a country-based or on a world base? I mean, there's lots of decisions. I would
I'm
start.
interested in both, but because we are a global organization globally, because let's say we have so little time. I'm absolutely frustrated because I have so many questions here, but you also compiled to bring us good nuggets. So let's think at the global scale, because the SDGs, especially climate, there is an existential threat for the future generations, for us. We need to tackle that quickly. But there is a numbness, and we have all of these irrationalities. So how would you design better policies and initiatives where you can enable a global narrative that people align to believe on and just support, to be good enough, you know?
So, there's what we could do theoretically and what we can do practically. I sadly think that the UN is not close to where I wish it would have been in terms of a leading power in the world. I really wish it was, and I think there's lots of work to try and create that. And I think that if we ever get the UN to be a truly world organization that people trust, then I think we could do cross subsidies across countries. But I think until it works out, I would try to encourage countries to make their own bilateral connection with other countries, and try to enlarge the pie between them. My sense is that when we come to discussions or negotiation or whatever, we often think that we are splitting a pie. If you get 55 cents, I get 45. If you get 60, I get 40, and so on. The reality is that there's lots and lots of things where we can increase the pie, where there's the total goodness that can come out of deep collaboration is much higher. So I think what I would try to do is I would try to create a cross-country collaboration, taking countries in the West, countries that are less in the West, and try to figure out how we get their connection to create more good. Is it with trading? Is it with opportunities for education? But there was a sense that Europe will do that to some degree. But I think if it's so big and left to the individuals, it's not as effective. I think if we did it in a more concentrated way with two countries, we might have a better way to do it. And at the same time, I would try to work very hard to make the UN the organization we all would have liked it to be.
Yeah, and this is on our watch. And Tech Leadership Lab, it's basically an ecosystem that wants to drive the SDGs to be solved sooner, in time. And we cannot just allow that to have one organization in place. I mean, the UN did a lot of good for us, humanity. We cannot deny that at any chance. But then in time, things just got converted. We don't enter in detail. So, it's one of the latest definitions for TLR. We are the entrepreneurial version of the UN. To solve and connect things in a more tech startup-ish vibe, because technology can connect us to the future, and we are more agile to think about aspects that don't need a next fiscal year, or we don't have 1,000 or 2,000 lobbyists to go to the COP just because they want to defend something that we want to dismiss completely, and then to say that this is fair and this is what will bring us forward. So no hypocrisy, unity, but also to use behavioral science in a way that you can create social norms, create compliancy, like the way you have police. Why not just put sustainability in a way that you put it in the front end and in front of citizens to know this is real, this is here, this is urgent, let's do something, because there is so much numbness. And so I'm thinking all the time, okay, we create this ecosystem, but I still want to go faster. And so if you have any ideas, any kind of examples around climate change, where we even have the deniers today with all the data and factual aspects of it, we have people who denied us. And also, if you have some good examples that could become global or bigger initiatives that we could just take on in order to act as good ancestors, basically.
So, maybe because our time is almost up, I'll just give one example from a simple experiment we did in Kenya. And this was an experiment where we tried to get very low income people to save a little bit of money for a rainy day. And why did we want to do it? Because if you're very poor and you have a rainy day, maybe somebody breaks their leg or the roof is leaking or something is happening, you need to start borrowing money from loan sharks, and then poverty gets worse and worse and worse, and everybody loses when poverty gets worse and worse and worse. Well, aside from the loan shark, but really everybody is losing. And we created a system where these people could put a little bit of money away, and we tried to motivate them to do it. And we tried different things. Some people we said, try it. We reminded them. Some people we sent them text messages if they came from their kids. Some people we gave them a match. Some people gave them a match with loss aversion. But the most successful approach was to give them a coin about this size with 24 numbers written on the edges. And we said, put that coin somewhere invisible in your hut. And every week when you save, scratch the number for that week, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like up and down. And every week you didn't save, scratch it like a minus. And that coin created higher savings than 20% match, higher saving than anything else, much more. Now, what was it about this coin? This coin was basically a communication method. It was a way for the breadwinner to say, I've done my job. You know, if you happen to make some money today, there are things you could do that are visible. You can buy a cookie, I can buy a fruit, kerosene, water. And there are things that we do that are invisible. Pay debt, save money, buy insurance. And this coin basically made the invisible visible. All of a sudden, a breadwinner that was contributing to the family's savings, there was a way for the family to see that they were actually doing something for the whole family. And I think with a lot of the development goals, we ask people to do lots of things that are invisible. And if you ask me for kind of one simple way to start thinking about this, it would be, how do we make the invisible visible? If we are asking people to do so much work, how do we make it visible for themselves, visible to their significant other? I'm not saying visible to the world, visible to their kids. You know, how do we at least start to make those things so that people could see for themselves what impact they have, that they could show to other people, that they could get some reflection in that? I think if from all the tricks of social science, I think it's one of the new ones that we only recently started understanding that I think could have a big role to play.
Okay, so there's just run away this hour. You can bet that I will have some questions. I noted here so many pages around the ideas that I just got from this discussion alone and all the attendances as well. So we appreciate your presence today. your last words, if you have, before I wrap up our meeting, if you have a last message, and also if people can do something, or where are you with your plans? What are you doing? What are you up to?
I sadly I have to run to my next meeting, so I can't tell you where I am. But I think, take human irrationality as a basic element for what you need to work with. Work with it, not against it. And I think this way we could make plans and programs that will be much more effective. And with this, I will say thank you so much. Lovely to see you again. Nice to meet all of you. Bye for now.
Bye for now, then, faster. And we have a lot of news. If you didn't saw them, just go on our main website here and see if you want to contribute, because we are creating the ecosystem where we would want everyone who is working inside the SDGs, no matter if you're a tech startup founder, creating anything, an innovation that might be scalable and solve an SDG problem, or if you are an expert, you are an academic researcher, no matter what, who you are, legislator, AI expert as well, because you see, we wrap everything around AI as a helper, as a tool to have, although we are assessing the price for that. And we are creating a big and a large ecosystem where we will basically want to match the right people and the right projects between each other. And we are also considering to create an LLM, a large language model, that became an idea for TLL since February, but we truly want to know how important this is for you, if you are working inside the SDGs, to have a platform that can deliver to you in real time and with fact check what is going on around any of the SDGs. So if you want such solutions, or if you want to be part of the ecosystem, please complete those forms. And those are on the main page. You received them in the newsletter today, but we are going to the next level. And we also have our first services that will increase our growth as TLL on the first page. And those were considered as top priority or main services that any tech or startup would need. And those will be provided because it's just super fresh by, let's say, a tribe of people from around the world who are experts in different areas. And so you will not only help Tech Leadership Lab and you will become as a guardian for our mission, but you will also help people who are very good in their work, but they are working from different parts of the world, and maybe that paycheck for them would be for a full month or something. So we start to do very concrete action in uniting the globe, but also providing for each other. So I am expecting you back, and also share this with those who care about humanity. And with that said, until the next time, have an awesome day or evening, or wherever you are in this world. Bye.
In a world yearning for change, there exists a community of visionaries and innovators, united by a common goal to solve Earth's biggest challenges. We embody sustainability, unity, and empathy. Our character and reliability shine as beacons of hope. As role models for future generations, we're building a world where wisdom and consciousness rise, harmonizing life with nature and all species. Join us. Together, let's create a balanced, sustainable future for all.